Hello, Rich from PCGamesn here, and Destiny 2 is finally out on PC, which means I can stop caveating everything I write about it with mealy-mouthed sentiments like, oh, this will be really interesting when it finally comes to PC, a derpy derpy derp. Anyway, here's our review, and don't say it's redundant because it's already been out on console for 6 weeks. That just means we know what it's like to live with now, so we're going to talk about that, as well as its performance on PC. Because it's a sprawling game made of many different modules, I thought it might make sense to review each in turn. So we'll start with the campaign. So everything you heard about the original's campaign is true. It was nonsense. The sequel's is much better, but just because it clears a low bar doesn't mean it's good by normal standards. Dominus Ghaul, leader of an elite faction of a hostile alien race called the Cabal, attacks Earth's last city and severs your connection to the Traveler. That's Destiny's big white ball. This leaves you without your space magic, but you get that back pretty soon or else there wouldn't be a game. It's then up to you to rally the city's scattered warriors and counterattack. As a villain, Ghaul has promise. Rejected by a regime and an emperor who he perceives to be corrupt and decadent, he's driven by a Napoleonic inferiority complex. He could just steal the Traveler's powers, but he'd rather prove himself worthy of them. Interesting premise, right? Shame it never goes anywhere. Why isn't Ghaul worthy? It's the central question of his character, and it's never actually answered. There is a character who ought to know, but he turns out to be full of it, much like the Exo-Stranger in the original game who infamously never had time to explain. It's kind of like if Luke had asked Obi-Wan what the Force was and Obi-Wan had turned around and gone, buggered if I know. Bungie even have Ghaul paraphrase the ultimate villain cliché in the script's worst but not its only clangor.
We are not so different, your Traveler and I.
Anyway, that's the story. How's the gameplay? The campaign starts promisingly. Ghaul's attack is the backdrop for a bombastic opening mission, while your depowered escape from the city provides a mournful, downbeat contrast, accompanied by a phenomenal soundtrack that swells in just the right places to raise goosebumps. The end of the campaign pulls the same tricks, throwing in a dumbly fun tank mission and one of the most jaw-dropping sci-fi settings I've ever seen in a game. The moment-to-moment gun feel is also terrific, as you'd expect from Bungie, and has been transplanted successfully to PC. That's just as well because the middle half of the campaign is a bit of a drag, thanks to stupid enemies and trivial objectives. It's always pretty, always atmospheric, there's lots of creepy fights against swarms of hive in darkened tunnels, that kind of thing, but Destiny 2 wants to empower you, not challenge you. It's a point rammed home in moments like the missions that give you endless supercharge, and in a bizarre change from the original, the removal of difficulty settings. You can replay missions on higher difficulties after you finish the campaign, but there's not much incentive to do so. In fairness, this wild power fantasy is pretty fun for a while, kind of like running around in God mode back when cheat codes were a thing. But if you're a shooter fan looking for a challenge, Destiny 2's campaign just can't compete with the likes of Doom or the rebooted Wolfenstein games or Titanfall 2. Unlike those games though, Destiny 2's PvE isn't finished after the campaign. This brings us on to mid-game PvE, also known as the grind. It's only after you finish the campaign, which should take you 8 or so hours, possibly less, that you finally get a Sparrow, one of Destiny 2's jet bikes. This immediately makes running around its lovely open worlds a lot more fun. It's a pretty good time ticking off side quests and plundering dungeon-like lost sectors, but the real highlights of this phase of the game are the strikes. 3-person cooperative missions with bespoke levels and more challenging mechanics. Destiny 2's are the best in the series so far. The Pyramidion, my personal favourite, has you dancing between lasers on a dive into a menacing alien construct that looks like it was designed by MC Escher. It's great. The trouble is, you can't select it or any other strike individually. They're grouped into a single playlist which will choose the next strike at random. These playlists were a thing in the original as well, but at least there you could just pick a strike individually if you fancied playing it. Now, without the option to do that, the more I think about this system, the weirder it seems. It implicitly assumes you don't want a choice of specific activities that are fun to play in themselves, but rather just a choice of loot-dropping treadmills to run on. The substance of what you're actually playing is so unimportant that it's literally randomized. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because public events are a much more generous treadmill, especially if you complete their heroic objectives. This removes any loot-based incentive to queue for strikes, or indeed to do almost anything else in the mid-game. Grind was a problem in the original Destiny because loot drops were too stingy. Now it's a problem in the sequel because the dullest activities are incentivized over the best. It could be fixed in a rebalancing patch, so let's hope for that. In the meanwhile, at the end of this phase is the raid and the endgame. When you reach a certain gear level, further progress will come only by completing your weekly milestones. These group the game's core activities into a number of short quests: public events, PvP games, the Nightfall Strike, which adds a number of difficulty-raising modifiers, and the raid. Each milestone drops endgame loot, and though the raid has its own gear set, it no longer sits above all others in its own tier, like it would in a normal MMO. This means that in Destiny 2 you can hit the power cap without ever beating the raid. It'll just take a little while longer. This is one of many ways in which Destiny 2 is more casual friendly, but it does give you fewer reasons to run the raid over and over again, especially because the raid's gear is nothing like as special now. Famous guns like Fatebringer, Vision of Confluence, and the Vex Mythoclast had players in the original Destiny running its celebrated Vault of Glass raid 3 times a week, whereas this time around no one really cares if Ghost Primus drops or not. These weaker incentives to rerun the raid has the effect of truncating Destiny 2's endgame, and some console players are already complaining that they're running out of things to do more than a month before the next DLC drops. The raid itself has divided fans. It's much more focused on mechanical execution than combat skill, which makes it harder to carry weak links and thus can be frustrating, but it still delivers that rush when you complete it. Personally, I'm a fan. The Gauntlet in particular is one of my favourite Destiny raid encounters so far, a slick team challenge that feels great when everything is running smoothly, like one of those oddly satisfying YouTube videos. The Leviathan is also the most ambitious raid in the series so far. It plays with its structure every week, it has a ton of secrets to discover, and it makes an immediate visual statement when you warp in to witness this colossal golden palace. If you've always wondered what it feels like to beat a big team challenge like this, Destiny 2 is a much easier way to get a taste than starting a WoW account. And finally, PvP. For competitive types, Destiny 2's PvP mode, the Crucible, offers something unique on PC. There's a hint of Call of Duty in the level designs, although the pace is less hectic thanks to larger maps, smaller teams, and higher times to kill, which also enable a meaningful headshot bias and thus more skillful gunplay. Varied classes add another tactical layer, but the game is not built around their synergies as in, say, Overwatch. Power ammo and super abilities enable you to make big plays, but outside of these, teamwork is essential for success. However, this last point has made solo queuing hazardous, at least on console, and like the strikes, you can't choose any of the Crucible's 5 game modes individually. They're grouped into 2 playlists. I guess the idea is a less fragmented player pool and thus faster matchmaking, but it's still annoying if you enjoy Control, a zone capture mode, but hate Supremacy, which is like COD's Kill Confirmed. Overall, it strikes a lovely balance between all the big competitive shooters in terms of its pacing and its accessibility. Once again, it's also much better on PC, thanks to the uncapped frame rate and the immediacy of mouse input. Going back to console after the PC preview event and waiting that extra half second for my crosshair to respond to my thumbstick was genuinely painful. Closing thoughts. Comparisons to the original Destiny are inevitable to some extent when discussing the sequel, but what should it mean to PC gamers who never had to suffer the original's mistakes? The Destiny 2 is a much better game. You don't care that it has an in-game map now, or a story that makes sense. It's the least you expect, and rightly so. So here's what is impressive about Destiny 2. It looks, feels, and sounds better than anything on the market, and when it all comes together in PvP, in the raid, at the odd, stunning moment in the campaign, it really is pretty special. Bungie have done a terrific job with the PC version as well, and our platform plays to its real strengths. So if you are going to get it on PC. However, aesthetic brilliance and great gunplay can't wholly save Destiny 2's campaign from trivial difficulty and a go-nowhere plot. Later in the game, its best content is also undervalued by its reward economy, which nudges you towards a dumb treadmill of public events and truncates its endgame. Now, some of this may change. The story of the original Destiny was one of continuous improvement over the game's life cycle, and Bungie have already begun this process, to their credit. They've unveiled a number of promising changes for Season 2 of Destiny 2 at TwitchCon 2017, and December's coming Osiris DLC will finally tell the story of one of the universe's most interesting characters. So if you're not sold yet, there's no need to decide just now. If one thing is certain, it's that Destiny will go on and on. Ultimately, Destiny 2 is progress towards the series' immense potential, and in that respect, it's the best the series has ever been. But it wouldn't be Destiny without just a little bit of frustration that it's not even better. And that's about it. That's our Destiny 2 PC review. We hope you found that helpful. Give us a like if you did. Let us know down in the comments if you're going to pick it up or if you're going to hold off. Share, subscribe. There's plenty more Destiny 2 content and more PC gaming content in general on our YouTube channel and on our website. Until we see you next time, thanks very much for watching, and take care.